It was always the dividing line. And I went to Occidental College, so Oxford, Occidental, we many similarities. And yeah, we were the closest on that side. And then there was John Graham and Eric over there. Eric and I sometimes are quite close because we're the two that work independently or singly. But Mike, Terry, and I are still really close, and it's always been like that.
But presumably in the way it was put together, I mean, you were separate to some degree anyway, because they wrote together, you very rarely acted. So again, there was a separation there already.
No, that was always that, because I didn't have time to go to rehearsals, nor was I didn't consider myself a performer. I did what I did. And I was busy doing that while they were rehearsing. What would happen would be on the day of the show, I'd come in with my cans of film under my arm and say, here we go, boom. And I said, well, what's going? What's available? Where's the costumes nobody wants to wear?
Cardinal Fang! Fetch the comfy chair. The comfy chair?
And Python has become hugely significant and a reference point in comedy and all that. Did you have any sense at all at the time working on it that something big was happening?
No, it was just fun. It was just, that's what was nice about it. There was no view outside of us entertaining ourselves in many ways, and if with any luck, a bit of an audience. We were kind of the beginning and the end. We chose what went in, what made us laugh, and that was the show. And again, it was a kind of arrogance, but it seemed to be a more honest one because everybody else was in showbiz trying to please the audience. Hey, it's all of this. And we just stood back and didn't do it that way.
And the reaction from the BBC, they were quite bemused by what they'd got.
I suspect they still are. You never see it, do you, on the BBC? They've got a strange relationship between Python and the BBC. No, they didn't know what they got. I think after the fourth show, they pulled us off, replaced us with the Horse Show of the Year. But what was so wonderful in the Horse Show of the Year, in the middle of it, they played the march. And that was wonderful.
Monty Python's Flying Circuses!
The use of the Caesar Liberty Bell, that was your idea.
Well, Terry Jones is now beginning to think it's his idea. I'm convinced it's mine. That's the dangerous thing about Python now. I mean, who did what? You don't know anymore in many cases. And
no, it's interesting. They literally don't know who wrote which sketch.
No, I think there's a lot of sketches. You just know that John wrote the parrots and John Graham. Mike wrote da-da-da. You know that, but there's a lot of stuff that is because it would start with one group of people having written it, and then another would take over. So the things started blending. And Eric was the most chameleon-like, and he could suddenly turn a sketch that could have been just like one of John Graham's or one of like Mike and Terry's, and it all started shifting. So I think it's harder to remember, but I'm convinced it was me that chose the Liberty Bell because I remember a man named Roger Last came in with a bunch of Sousa marches because I thought a march would be nice, and I've always liked Sousa marches, and then it was that bong at the start that I said, that's the one.
But also for the kind of animation you were doing, it has that incredible sense of movement.
You go like that. That's why I love marches. I mean, marches are so wonderful because I think they actually hit some kind of resonant rhythm within people's bodies, and that's why you want to march with them.
And even Michael Palin, who is officially Britain's nicest man, has referred to tensions. Tensions is the word he uses about the Python gang, but you remember those? Oh yeah, that was part of the. That's what I think made it good. It was this fine balance between people who actually respected each other, liked each other, and were competing, and discovered that they were not as they were more distant in their thinking than not. I mean, what tended to happen, it would usually focus on John on one side and Terry J on the other, and the rest of us would sort of stand back and watch this happen, but they both represented different sides of Python. I think what's interesting is that we did, when was it, 5 years ago, there was a thing we did on the BBC, this 900th anniversary of Monty Python or something.
And we all had a wonderful time. We loved each other. It was great to see each other. It was a terrible show, I thought. It was the tensions that kept it really alive, and really, it was tense, and people fought for things, and people got angry, and people got passionate. And that's why I think the stuff was good.
And Cleese and Terry Jones representing different sides. Cleese was what, the intense cerebral side, and Terry Jones was the
more conceptual, the heartfelt from the gut, from all of those things. Yeah, and that tended the way it worked, because Mike, Terry, and I suppose, were slightly more abstract and conceptual, or even possibly more filmic as well, where the other side was about two people beating each other up mentally, verbally, or whatever, or playing with words. And there tended to be that difference. But a lot of it just became people wanted their material in, and so they started fighting for it.
And it was also very different for you. The impact on you was less obvious, because whereas John Cleese notoriously had people following him down the street, doing funny walks, you were not connected visually with it in the same way.
It's one of those things, you're growing up, you want to be famous, everybody wants to be famous, and you long for it, and then you see what it's like. And there was John, and he couldn't walk down the street without being asked to do a silly walk, do something. And I really enjoyed the fact that I wasn't known. I remember being shocked. There was one, I don't know, late night lineup or one of the shows that we were on, and I remember going the next day into some shops, and people said, guess who's there? And I didn't like it. It just was. I prefer to be able to walk around unknown, unobserved, and to do the observing.
You can see now, looking back, that Monty Python led to you being able to direct movies. Monty Python and the Holy Grail in 1974. Had that always been a plan for you?
Yeah, I think it was something I always wanted to do. At first it was kind of vague, and that's why when I went to New York, film school, that was, wanted to get into movies, but I didn't know how. When later I ended up in Los Angeles, I couldn't see how to do it either. I mean, I knew I couldn't work my way up through a system. I just don't have the ability to start as a T-boy and slowly go up like that. But I was always frustrated by the fact that I want to make movies and I don't know how to do this. So when finally Holy Grail comes along and we're in a position to do whatever we wanted and however we wanted, Terry and I, who are both wanting to make movies, said, everybody named Terry gets to direct, and everybody agreed. Because nobody else wanted to do it, and they realized it's a bit of a dog's body job, but it was also a chance to try to do it. And the two of us set out, and up till that point we had been seemingly of a completely singular mind. And it was only when we actually started shooting that I realized we're not quite the same person, and disagreements started. And in the end, and also I had been so wrapped up in being a cartoonist and working alone, I didn't have the social skills you need to really direct, or work with that crowd anyway. And
well, I was going to say, that's important, because we talked about the tensions. A key tension for you was that they were not really directable, were they, the Python?
Yeah, well, they didn't seem to understand what was needed to get the shot. The moment that it finally cracked was, there's a scene where, the cows are being thrown over the battlement, cows and all the animals. Now, to do that, we had to get their heads below the crenellations of the castle, so I could then cut a mat and put these animals in later. And they were wearing the armor, and we dug a hole in the ground for the camera to get it the right angle. And then they had to kneel, and they were getting uncomfortable and bitchy about the whole thing. And I said, I don't need this. I didn't write this sketch. This is mine. I'm just trying to make it work on film as you wrote it. And so I went off in a huff. The director leaves in a huff and lies down in the tall grass. I'm not going to play anymore. It was just ridiculous. So Terry took over, and then we decided, Terry works with them, I'll stay back with the camera, and then that's how we divided it.
If you do not agree to my commands, then I shall... Jesus Christ! Right.
There was a very funny moment early on when Terry and I realized we were not quite saying the same thing to the crew and everybody. We're two voices shouting slightly differently, and we got the assistant director to be the common voice, the one voice. And then we discovered he wanted to be a film director as well, and he was making a third film. And so oh, that doesn't work. Pull him back. No. But I don't know how we did it, because in 4.5 weeks we made that movie. And everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and yet we did it. And it was just being so naive and young and energetic and determined. And I look back and say, a miracle.
And the different visions that you and Terry Jones had, what was the point of disagreement? It
tended to be me with my visual sense wanting to get it right, and Terry just wanting to shoot the scene. It was about that more than anything else, and it's. And that continued. That's why in Life of Brian I designed and he directed, because I didn't want to get into that thing again, because I got very definite ideas how that shot should look. And if we don't get it right, I'm not happy. And the good thing about Terry is he's less concerned, which is better for the group, because the group just needs to get on and do what the group does, which is be funny, and not necessarily be funny with the light just like that, and the chin just like that.
Now, it's interesting now that you seem very quickly to go off into your own films, even though there are other Python movies. You're less involved, but that was to do with, that was a formal decision to leave them to it.
Yeah, I mean, because partly I realized I wasn't really cut out to do it. I didn't have the patience or the words beyond a bunch of to get them to do what they should do. Come on, let's have a bunch of action over here, or maybe a bunch of dialogue over here. And I went off and did Jabberwocky on my own, and I loved it, because suddenly I was the director, and great people like Max Wall and John LeMessurier would do what I asked them to do. If I said, Max, lie down here, and I'm going to cover you with dust, and then you're going to get up coughing. He did it. He didn't complain. He didn't argue that it was going to be uncomfortable. And I thought, well, this is great. I'll do this job in the future and let Terry continue with the group.
Looking again at Jabberwocky, the Time Bandits, it's pretty clear from then on, you were clear what he wanted to do, which was to make a kind of human cartoon was what they were. That the heart of it is cartooning. I mean, all your storyboards are very carefully drawn at the very beginning.
Yeah, I think that was there. That was one of the problems. It was, when you began, the storyboards are there to tell me what to do on the day, because I'll forget. And it was also, again, trying to control it. As I've gone on, I don't storyboard anymore, because I found I was restricting the actors a lot. I mean, they did it for me, but in retrospect, I thought, well, I could have given them more space, and they would have been more comfortable and maybe have done even better work. So that's what was going on in the early days. And it is a strange transition from sort of Python cartoons to reality and real acting and real storytelling. I don't know if I've ever made that transition completely.
But I was going to say, I mean, it's there, even Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but then Jabberwocky, Time Bandits. Almost nothing you've ever done has been set in the present. I mean, in Time Bandits, there are clearly scenes in the present, but the boy rapidly escapes from them and goes into this fantasy world. You're happier in the past, or in the case of Brazil, the future.
Yeah, I mean, Fisher King is set in the present, but it's like I can't quite get to grips with it. I don't understand the present as much as where if it's a slightly removed world. I've got freedom now, because we all know what most people agree what the present is, and to me it restricts me. So if I'm one step away, I can then play. The stories have always been about the present. They're always contemporary ideas being dressed up in stranger costumes and sets. And
Time Bandits is interesting because it has clear connection with Python, notably Michael Palin, but it's you going off on your own. But what was the starting idea for that?
Well, I was trying to get Brazil made, and nobody was interested. So I sat down one weekend and said, I'm going to write something that'll be for all the family. Let's just do a movie for everybody. And so I came up with the idea, the basic shape of the thing, and then I called Mike up and said, do you want to play? And then he got on board, and off we went. But it started really, wanting to tell a film from a kid's point of view and have the camera at that level, and then fearing that a child wouldn't be able to sustain the film, so let's surround him with people of a similar height. So it's working that way. I mean, I work in some strange ways sometimes. It's not so much clear what the story is, but it's how to tell that kind of tale and with the physical and complexities that I want. So now we've got a group of dwarves in there. And it's just fantastic. It's kind of like Snow White, I suppose. I'm falling back into the same old things. But it allowed me to have a group of guys who are normally stuck inside of Womble costumes in tin cans and allow them to be the heroes and never really comment on how tall or not tall they are, and they become the heroes of the piece. And there's something when you take people and put them into a situation they've always dreamed of being able to play in, and they're brilliant in it.
Fortress of ultimate darkness is somewhere over there, I promise you.
Oh, you're joking, Randall. There's nothing over there.
But look, we're so close.
You've been saying that for the last 40 miles.
Let's go back. We'll all die out here.
Yeah. Can't give up now. When can we give up? Come on, it's just a bit further.
Clearly movies are supposed to be visual, but there are obviously directors who start with dialogue or a theme or whatever, but in describing how Time Bandits came, everything, it's a series of visual connections. It always comes from images for you.
I think so. Well, actually, no. I just knew that here's a kid, he reads, his parents are awful, he wants to escape to another place. And then let's pop around through various times. I mean, it really came, when I think about it, it came from this idea that here are the co-creators of the world, God's helpers, who got bored and thought crime would be more interesting. And so you go from the sublime, and then the idea, once you're doing crime and how you escape into the past before the crime is committed. And those are the way my mind was working. And then if we can incorporate lots of famous historical characters, we can play with the cliches about them.
Hello, I'm Hood.
It's Robin Hood.
Say good morning, you scum!
Good morning. You're all robbers.
Oh,
then,
the best,
are you?
Mr. Hood.
Jolly good. And you're a robber, are you? Jolly good. And do you enjoy robbing then?
Well, it helps pay the rent, sir.
Jolly good. And you're a robber too, are you? How long have you been a robber?
4'1".